Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Helen Rosenfeld. I'm the Executive Director with the Massachusetts Science and Engineering Fair. Thanks for joining us this evening. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Sarah Fankhauser. She is heading the Journal of Emerging Investigators. She will share far more about that than my introduction could. And we'll open it up for Q&A, and this will be recorded and put on our YouTube channel. So welcome, Dr. Fankhauser, and thank you all for joining this evening.
Yes, thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for joining or for those who are listening. I am really excited to share with you an opportunity to take your science, the next step after science fair. So I'm going to spend about 25 minutes, maybe a little less, talking about the Journal of Emerging Investigators as a wonderful opportunity for you to share the science that you've already done. And then I'm happy to, answer any questions that you all have. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And this is probably going to look funky for just a minute. Okay. There we go. Wait, no, I'm still not in the right. Okay. So you should see my entire screen now. And if you can't, hopefully someone will jump in and tell me. All right. So I am Sarah Fankhauser. My day job is as an associate professor of biology at Oxford College of Emory University, where I get to explain science and work alongside college students every day, which I love. And then my other job is as the founder and board chair of the Journal of Emerging Investigators. And so I want to take a little bit of time and just tell you about kind of the motivation behind starting the Journal of Emerging Investigators and why I think and others think that publishing your scientific research is such a great opportunity. So my next two slides are really, as I mentioned, the build up for why JEI and why as scientists we think that a science journal for students like you can provide such a valuable experience for young scientists. So let me just start off by looking at how scientists spend their time. So typically when we think of a scientist, we think of them in the lab or in the field doing an experiment. But a study that is several years old now showed that actually scientists spend a greater proportion of their time, upwards of 60% of their time, actually reading and writing and communicating their science. So scientists are spending a lot more time outside the lab doing these communication things than actually inside the lab. And so these skills of reading and writing and communicating are just so critical to how scientists do science. And if we think about how scientists do science, we get an even more in-depth picture of all the things that scientists engages in with this right-hand graphic, which I realize is really small, but hopefully what you're getting a sense of, and this comes out Berkeley, are all these interconnected practices. And you'll see at the top, there's exploration and discovery. And within that, there is learning about the research from other scientists, so through the literature, or perhaps you've already done this through looking at the science fair projects of your peers, right? There's also this community analysis and feedback where scientists are sharing their work with other scientists, getting feedback, revising, and then ultimately publishing to benefit and produce outcomes that other scientists can use in their own projects. And so really JEI is just one part of this large process of science. And it's through JEI and other literature that scientists like you can develop new ideas, develop hypotheses, learn or refine methods, interpret results, really unpack and understand the impact of the results, and then ultimately share your work with others to continue this cycle of learning and constructing new scientific knowledge. And as I was thinking about this process many years ago, this was really the inspiration for starting the Journal of Emerging Investigators when I myself was a graduate student at Harvard. And so the Journal of Emerging Investigators, or JEI for short, as I've been calling it, is an online, free, peer-reviewed science journal dedicated to mentoring and publishing the research of middle and high school students. And so the research that you will find on our website is performed by students, it's written by students, and ultimately it's meant to be read by students. Uh, so in the next few slides, I just want to take you through the JEI process. So if you're interested in taking your science fair project and potentially publishing it, what would that process look like? So our flagship program is our science journal. We have a few other outreach endeavors, but I will focus on the publication branch. And our mission of publication is to support students and not just getting their work on our website, but mentoring them through this peer review process, which I'll get into in a little bit. But we provide a lot of guidance to students and their teachers, actually, or research mentors to help them in this process of taking their research and creating a professional scientific paper, or what we call a primary research article from that work. And so here you see just our homepage, and we have the submission guide tab. And once you land on that, you'll see all of these icons that help you walk through the steps of taking your research project. So maybe you have a paper already, or maybe you have the work that you did with Science Fair. And so how can you start actually building a primary scientific paper from that? And so the anatomy, what I call the anatomy of a paper, may be a little bit daunting and unfamiliar to you at first, but it's actually not that much different than what goes into a typical science fair board. It's just arranged a little bit differently and may have a little bit more text involved. So I'm going to briefly break down what a scientific paper entails. And again, all of this information is on that submission guide as well on our website. But here on the left, you have a typical science fair board. You have your abstract, you have some background information, your materials and methods, your results, and then maybe some sort of discussion that would include your conclusions and future directions. And you can see that all of these components are actually part of a scientific paper. So I will say there may be some slight differences. So for example, you'll have to have a title page, which obviously has your title. Summary, which is what we call the abstract, is really just a brief overview of the entire project, from your motivation to a little bit of background to what you found. You have your introduction, where you're setting up the context of your study, like why you decided to do it, why you find it important. Your results, which would be the textual descriptions of your data, along with any figures or tables, and then your discussion. So why are your results meaningful, or what do they mean? And particularly, what do they mean in the context of what other scientists have done? And then we actually asked for students to submit their materials and methods, or that section after their discussion, because when students are reading these articles, we really want them to focus on kind of the motivation and the work that's done, and not get bogged down into the details of like, how exactly did this student do this particular experiment? It's in there, it's in the materials and methods. They're welcome to reference it, but it comes after the discussion. So when you, if you're interested in writing up your paper, what you actually submit is very simple. It's just a double-spaced Word document with all of these parts as headers. And then you can go to the submit button on our website. Make sure that you have all these components and that you have read through some of documentation. So if you worked with vertebrate animals, or if you worked with humans. So for example, if you did survey research, there's some documentation that you would have to submit, but you would likely already have that if you submitted a project that you've done with science fair. So what is really unique about JEI, and something that our student authors find to be the most valuable, is our really constructive and supportive peer review process that each student will experience upon submission of their paper. You'll find information on the publication pipeline on our website, but to walk you through this, students, with the help of an adult, a research mentor, teacher, will submit the paper to our online publication portal. And then what happens is a series of steps where that paper will actually be reviewed by several different people, by several different scientists. The first step is what we call pre-review. This is where a managing editor will just make sure that all the pieces are there, that that you have an introduction, you have references, you have a discussion. Sorry, I have a little itch in my throat. And then once the paper makes it through peer review, which is fairly quick, we'll undergo scientific review. And this is where the associate editor will send out your paper to 3 to 4 scientists in that field. So for example, if you write a paper about, I don't know, plant growth with coffee versus milk, I don't know, totally random example, they're going to send that paper out to a botanist or someone that understands kind of how chemicals can impact growth. And then those scientists will review your paper and provide you constructive feedback on all aspects. So not just like how you wrote the paper and communicated the science, making sure that that you're writing in a clear way that accurately conveys the information in the science, but also helps you think more deeply about the actual kind of scientific context of your work. So is your hypothesis kind of justified based on past work? Is your are your results correctly interpreted, or are there potential alternative conclusions? So these are the types of things that the reviewers will point out and comment on during the process of peer review. And then the comments from the reviewers and the editor are going to be sent back to the student with a condensed list to say, okay, here are the major changes that you'll need to make for your paper to be published. Here are some minor ones. And then it's on you to make those changes. Excuse me. And then I have a 6-year-old in the house, so I'm always getting sick from her. And so then it will be on you to make those changes and then resubmit, at which point your paper will go through a process of copy editing, where our copy editors will go through and fix the small grammatical errors. And then the copy edit revision is fairly quick. It's just you're accepting their suggested edits. And then the proofing editor actually takes your Word document and turns it into a professional looking manuscript, which we'll see in a minute. And then it's published and it's there for the public to see. It's there for other scientists to get inspired by and potentially build on the work that you have started. And so we're really excited by the peer review process and the impact it has on young scientists. And our peer reviewers and our editors really view this process as a way of mentoring young students. So throughout this process, each student paper has about 25 hours worth of mentoring from over 14 different scientists that go into helping you get your paper to that final stage of publication. And I love this quote from Olivia, who is one of our editors, who really I think most clearly states, a sentiment that a lot of editors have. In particular, how she says, I value the opportunity to give authors feedback on their topic of interest, and I enjoy working with them as a sort of mentor through the publication process. So this is something that we really enjoy doing. And then ultimately, what students have is a professional looking final paper that is free. It's online. It's easily accessible. You can share it with the world. You can share it with your parents, with your teachers, your friends. And then, as I'll show you in a minute, each paper actually gets a lot of traction on our website. So that's exciting. Like, people are really reading these papers. And in case you're wondering, we accept papers from all areas of science. I mean, the majority of our papers are in the biological field. We have papers from engineering, although it's not oh yeah, it is. There's engineering, psychology, physics, math, chemistry. So really it's not limited in terms of the type of science. And authors come from all over the world. We are currently represented in over 40 states now, and 20 countries. Our articles published just keep skyrocketing. I updated this number 350 a few months ago, so we're certainly over that now, and certainly over the 1,000 student authors that we have mentored through this process. But hopefully you will be one of those authors. And our student authors find this to be an incredibly meaningful experience. It is a source of pride to have a published paper that you can share with others. But it's not just about getting that final product. It really is the whole experience of interacting with the peer reviewers and the editors. And I love this quote from Ethan, who was a ninth grader at the time of this, where he said the experience was a great way to get prepared for a life pursuing science. It really gave him an idea, like some of the work that goes into being a professional scientist. And then other comments from student authors, and these come from our anonymous survey. We always want to, survey our students and make sure that they are finding this experience valuable and figuring out what we can do better. But one of the students said that this experience taught me that science doesn't discriminate by age, which I love. You can be a scientist no matter what age you are. And then another student said that they're excited about conducting future projects. So, everyone at JEI is a volunteer, and we just get excited by seeing how students are really valuing this experience. And as I mentioned, each article gets a lot of traction on our website. And so one of the things that we find important is not just helping students publish their paper, but making sure that that published paper is useful to other young scientists. So we track our readership to see how many clicks is each paper getting. And on average, each paper gets about 325 reads or clicks in the first month of publication. And I can promise you, they're not all just me. I get very excited. I check our website every day and I'm always clicking on the new articles, but these are unique clicks. So I know it's not just me. And the readership comes from all over the world as well. And I don't know if there are any teachers that are going to even watch this webinar, but the teachers find this useful as well. So Demetrius Green is a teacher who had students published with JEI. And he found it a way to really build community with his students and the confidence in his students. And yeah, so if you are interested in taking your science fair project and submitting it to JEI, we have all of these resources on our website. You're welcome to visit it. Everything is free. One of the things that students and teachers find helpful is our annotated article, where you can see like where all the parts of a manuscript really are laid out in a paper. And then I'll just end with a thanks to our sponsors, New England Biolabs, Alloy Therapeutics, Richard Lounsbury Foundation, and the National Science Foundation. But all views are our own and do not represent the National Science Foundation. I have to say that. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Great, thank you so much. I think everyone on this call should definitely take note. I think coming into the summer, it's the perfect time for you to start to think about doing this. I know you probably want to get away from your academic work, but on the other hand, it's a really exciting opportunity. So I'm going to kick off the questions, and then I want to encourage everybody to either, if you're not comfortable taking yourself off mute, to feel free to put something in the chat, or just take yourself off mute, and when there's a moment, ask your question. But perhaps you can share with everybody sort of what a typical timeline is for this. So if they're to start thinking about this, and let's say submit something in the next month, what would a typical timeline be for completing a project or for, engaging in it?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. I'm just going to share this screen again so I can remind myself. So it is a process because well, I'll get into that process. So I would say that the fastest this has happened it's about 4 months. The typical from submission to publication is around 6 months at this point. And really, I'll just explain a few of those like longer parts of the timeline. One is the review process, where it takes a little bit of time to find the right reviewers for an article, and to give them time to really read the article and provide meaningful, constructive feedback. And then the revision part, this is entirely up to the student. So some students can turn around those revisions super fast. And particularly, I would say this is why it's probably ideal to do it in the summer, because you, as students, would probably have more time to work on those revisions during the summer. And then so we've had some students take a year to submit revisions, and it's not because we were asking for an enormous amount to be revised. It's just they were busy, understandably, and had other things on their plate. So that part really is just student dependent. And then copy editing plus revisions is about 4 weeks, although that can be fairly short depending on an article. And then proofing is about 2 weeks. And then publication, but some of this is just the 2 weeks are just guidelines for the typical amount of time it takes for student authors to respond to emails too. So if we were to send you the email with the final proof and that same day you were like, okay, we reviewed it, we're good to go, then it could be up on the website in the next few days. So, but it is a process. So it's something to keep in mind. And it's also just to note that as long as you have performed the majority of the work while still in school, like before college, then you are eligible to submit. So even if this bleeds into college years, like the process bleeds into your first year of college, that's fine.
So since nobody's putting anything in the chat or waving a hand yet, I'm going to ask another question. So some of our students do work in conjunction with another lab or an existing institution. Are there any issues with them publishing that work, or does that differentiate the process at all?
It doesn't differentiate the process. The key thing is to make sure that the principal investigator, the PI of the lab, agrees to the submission. So we do have many authors that are working in college or university labs or in connection with a college professor that have submitted to JEI. There are a few times where the level of the paper is incredibly sophisticated that we will welcome that publication, we will review it, but we've written back and suggested a different journal to submit to. I don't want to say a real journal. I will say a professional journal.
Great, thank you. Anybody on the call want to ask anything? Don't be shy.
And I will say, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. So is this something that is specifically open for the science fair students, or this is something that,
Yeah.
generally other kids would also, but I doubt they would have a project of that level, right? If they've not participated in the science fair.
So students are welcome to do their research in a variety of settings, whether it's through a science fair or it's at home, or even we've had students do research projects just as part of a class project. So it's not necessarily just for science fair students, although you are in a wonderful position to take the work that you've already done, which I'm sure is just exciting and just really well performed. And easily turn that into a paper that you could submit. So you've kind of done the hard part, which is the
Correct.
research. Now
Yeah.
you're ready to write it up.
Yeah.
And I would also say that we welcome submissions of all levels of sophistication of science. So many of the projects, particularly the ones that come out of science fair, are very sophisticated, but we really enjoy science, the homegrown grassroots science as well, that you can just do in your backyard or you can do in your garage.
And what is the frequency of the publication? Normally journal, they come out like once a month or every quarter. So what is the frequency of the
That's
journal?
a really great question. So we actually operate on a rolling basis. So as soon as an article is ready to be published, we publish it online. I think a lot of online journals are moving towards the rolling submission or rolling publication basis. It just really improves the access to science and ensures that scientists have that timely access to the articles.
Yeah.
The public as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess kids too who want to pursue, going to the science fair next year, they can get, good ideas. It's a good way to motivate kids. Yeah.
It is. That is a really great point. And you bring up, I'm going to look for this link real fast. For those who are interested, that maybe are just kind of in the early steps of their research project, we have a portal called Ask a Scientist that students can submit kind of early ideas to and get some feedback. This is very informal and just a way to bounce ideas off another scientist.
Okay, great.
Great questions. Thank you.
Anyone else? I'm wondering if there are you've seen trends for things that students should know in advance are often sort of places that students get hung up or kind of find as stumbling blocks as they're going through the process that they can anticipate as they're thinking about this.
I think my copy editors will love me for mentioning this. But one of the things, this is a minor, but students often, we see this a lot, is that students see the published papers online and think that they have to submit a paper that looks like that. That is in these double columns, has the figures placed where they should be. And that's not true. So you just need to submit a Word document for your text. Your figures are going to be separate. And then our proofing editors actually arrange everything to make it look pretty. So that's one kind of like minor hiccup. I would say another one is really just not recognizing just the time component from the get-go. But we try to keep in tight communication with the student authors and send them updates, and you can actually track the status of your manuscript, of your paper, and where it is in the process in our online portal.
So do you have specific, because, obviously every research project is different. So do you have like sections for biology, then, marine, you know, physics, physics related,
Yeah.
yeah, sections, and
So,
then,
oh,
yeah.
go ahead. I'll answer your question. And yeah.
And then the second part is like, what if, the research, because, the labs were closed, during this COVID time. So most of it is like a review based, a lot of historical information that's out in various journals. So you're okay with that, right? Plus some lab work. So it's like, you mix and match the basis of your, the work that was done. So you entertain that kind of work too, right?
So let me answer your first question, and then I'll get to your second one. We welcome papers in any field of science. On our main page, we break them down into 3 large categories. So the biological sciences, so you'll see the most recent papers that fall into that category.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I can just share my screen. So this is, I'm on the page right now. You'll see physical sciences and engineering, and then social science. But if you were to go, you could see this little search tab. You can search by keyword. And so, or you could go to articles. I haven't looked through here recently, but you have all of these different tabs that you can filter articles by or search by specific keywords. So in terms of review articles, we actually aren't accepting review articles right now, but if you have some level or some form of experimentation within within your paper, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be anything major.
Yeah.
But yeah, we kind of understand the COVID experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And for getting started, it would be just visiting the link that you've given, and then everything's there, how to proceed, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm happy to, let me go to my screen again. I can walk you through it. So if you go to submit and then submission guide,
Okay.
and then you can have, there's all this information about before you start your experiment, which you're welcome to review, obviously, but since you've made it through the science fair, a lot of these things I think you have already done. So for example, if you did vertebrate or human subject research, I'm sure there was documentation you had to submit with the science.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So then there's writing your manuscript. There's some information on authorship. So this is essentially saying that, the first author has to be the student, and then there can be multiple authors on the paper, but the first one has to be a student, and then the senior authors are going to be like your teacher or whoever you did the research with, or who had general supervision over your research.
Okay. All right.
And then we have manuscript formatting and content. So you can see the formatting guidelines, and then there's information on how to structure and what information to put into each section of this paper.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And there's common mistakes. So, yeah.
Somebody had asked about the timeline, which I think we covered earlier, but I was just wondering, it's on the website. That chart that you shared is also on your website, correct?
Yes,
maybe you can walk us where.
Yes, it is. Review timeline. Okay. Let me just go back so we can catch this. So it's on the submission guide. You scroll down, and then it's this review timeline. And here there are a few linked documents that might be helpful to give you examples of what to expect with something like copy editing or a review.
Great. And I answered the question saying it could take about 6 months, but that was on the high side based on what you shared. But that's, yeah, I just wanted to point out that varies based on somebody's efficiency and response. If the person who asked that question has any other additions to that, feel free to ask them now. Anyone else? Is JEI going to be flooded with your responses? Anyone?
I hope so. I'm just gonna put my email here. Let me see, make sure I got this right. So people are welcome to email me and ask me questions as well.
Well, great. Last chance. Anyone else? Okay. Well, we really appreciate your time this evening. Thank you for sharing this exciting opportunity. And for those on the call, I hope that you apply, submit, whatever the language you want to use is. Do you see we have one more question popping in here? Excellent. For a biomedical engineering project, would we need a clinical trial performed?
That is an emphatical no. You absolutely do not need clinical trial data.
Excellent. So, well, wonderful. If you all have questions, you now have an email and contact information, and we'll put this recording up. And excited for the opportunity. I hope students submit. Really would be wonderful to see Massachusetts or from beyond, but MSEF Science Fair students participating.
Absolutely, we would love it. So thank you all so much for your wonderful questions, and I hope that you consider submitting. And like I said, you're welcome to email me with any questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. This is great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.